Hello, thanks very much. Yes, I'll be talking, developing on Chrome OS, or Pixelbook for development, not actually developing Chrome OS. Just so anybody's not familiar, what we'll actually be probably talking about is Crostini. Anyone heard of Crostini? Yep, some fans, good. So I got my Pixelbook maybe a couple months ago, so I'm a newbie, but I thought I'd share my experiences because we're trying to get, I think, as many developers on it as possible, potentially. So just a bit about me. New company called Kazna, which is part of the Mantle Group family, which you may have heard more of Digio and Eliza. Digio is doing software dev, Eliza's ML and AI. Kazna's focused a lot more on GCP and Google Cloud. And yeah, eventually onto Chrome and moving into G Suite and that sort of thing. Right, so a quick run through what we'll do. This is just a lightning talk, so I'll try and keep this short and sweet. We'll just talk about Chrome OS a little bit, Android apps via Art and Arc, Linux beta, some of you may be from the demo, and then just impressions. So first off, Chrome OS, is anybody, actually, just before I start, anybody developing on, as their primary development device, a Pixelbook, by chance? We've got one? Great. So we'll chat after, I'm sure. Got all the heartache. But yeah, so this is Chrome OS. This is what it's released with. If you just go get a Chromebook, the Pixelbooks, are actually not released here in Australia, I don't think. You have to get them overseas. Probably why there's not a lot of people developing them. Eventually, if they do release them, they're a great piece of hardware. We'll cover that later. But this is what the OS looks like. You got your hardware, customized firmware, the Linux kernel, which was originally, I think, based on Debian. It's now maybe Gen 2, I think. X graphic libraries, your normal system libraries look pretty similar. Then there's, of course, Chromium, a window manager that sits on the side, and that then enables your PWAs, your websites, your extensions that sit on top. So that's the Chrome OS and its summary. Just to cover a little bit about the hardware and firmware and why Chrome OS is different than anything else. We've got customized firmware specifically for the Pixel and Chromebooks, which have this recovery firmware, so if there's any changes to the OS or to the firmware, to the OS or anything, attempting to sort of break in or have any security, that will automatically move to the recovery firmware, which then does a verified boot. So you can't mess with any of that. That's all baked in. It's also got a fast boot path, so it doesn't have things like a floppy write, which no one really uses these days. So you can spin up very fast, which is great, and the bootloader. Great, so that's that layer, and then if we move up a little bit, we've got our Chrome, which is using dbus now to then interact with the libraries, the system libraries from Linux, with a window manager that's got the JavaScript runtime, Shockwave, your HTML5, and again your apps on top. So I'm not sure when it was, but then they introduced, or Google introduced Android onto the stack, which sits next to the basic Chrome OS, and that's, you guys might be more familiar with that. Your application frameworks, your media server, system server. We won't go into too much of that. It was originally a container. It's still a container, because of the way I understand it with Art, it's actually now fully native and not actually a container per se. But anyway, yeah, it's a little bit abstract about which one it is. They had original fully inside of using C groups on kernel, and they then moved to another platform. I thought it was native, but it might still be considered a container. We'll talk more about containers in a second. So, introducing Linux. Turtles all the way down, and you'll see why. So, I don't know if anybody's familiar with that phrase yet, but you'll see in a second. So, introducing Linux beta, Linux now considered beta, but this is what it looks like again on the side. It's a third full stack sitting on top of the hardware, the customized firmware, Linux kernel, and it is utilizing KVM. So let's dig into that a bit more. So first off, we've got Chrome shell, or Crosh, I guess you'd call it. You get to that by hitting Control-Alt-T at runtime. That gets you into userland shell. I am not running in what's called developer mode, which gives you a full bash shell on the Chrome instance. That gives you access to USB devices. You need it for pretty much anything, but it does break all of the security at that point. So Google is working to fix that, we're hoping. And that gets you then to VMC, which manages the cross VM, which is Termina, and that's a virtual machine monitor using KVM. I was going to go into a demo on that, what that actually looks like. So I'm in Chrome here, Control T. Sorry, there we are. Now we can do VMC list. Can you guys see that? Yeah. Okay. There's Termina. So that's the VM. So this shell is fully Linux at this point. We've got the Termina. I can now go into the Termina. vshell into Termina. So the developer version will be full bash here, and you'll have lots of other, but this is the cut down crow shell, which will be tiny. Like if I do help, there's basically nothing there, right? So help advanced has got a bit more stuff, but it's still not a proper shell. So vshell Termina. So I'm now in the VM, and I've just jumped to the VM, so we'll go back to my slides. Sorry. Somewhere. Nope. Yeah, trying to find my tabs is a problem. Oh, no. That's my shell. Oh, yeah. That's right. It's in the browser, so I was like, where's my shell? Yeah. So you can start Termina now. There isn't GPU support, but you can start it manually. So if you just start up Chrome OS now, hit a Linux app, it's going to be not GPU enabled. You can enable it using that switch for the moment. So this Chrome shell is fully separate. It is a fully fledged userland service. It will interact with the Termina. As you can see there, next we're now talking about the Termina. Inside we can cat etc LSB version, you get your Chrome OS version, and you can also look at your mounts, which we'll do. Oh yeah, I'm in, yeah. Keep forgetting it's in the shell. That's here. Cat etc LSB, release, that's it. So you can see what it actually is. It's another Chrome instance. So it's actually Chrome OS again. It has got stuff stripped out of it from the original one on there, but it's basically, so you get Chrome, you got a VM of Chrome again, and that's what we're talking about here. The reason it's secure is because if you look at these mounts that are all up there, they're all read-only. There's a few places that are read-write. So that's inherent built-in security. All right, sorry, I'll speed up. Moving on, let's talk about, we move to the next layer now. So within the VM is something called Linux containers. This is LXD. Some of you might have heard of them. This is not Docker. It's like Docker, but it's not Docker. If you think of containers, it's called Linux containers. It's more secure because these containers are not privileged like Docker containers will be. It's secure by design. There was a recent run C vulnerability. I'm not sure if everyone's maybe have heard of that, which was quite serious for containers in the run C process. LXD runs containers but was not impacted by that vulnerability. So once we're in this, let's have a look what's under the not that one. So LXC list. So here's all my images. These are actually my containers. You can see I've got one running. It's called Penguin. I've got some other ones that I've had. And we can also have a look at our images. And these image list. Sorry. There we are. So those are images. I can also switch. Let's do LXC remote image list. Sorry. Okay, so this is now going external. I'm going to go get another list. So think of this as maybe Docker Hub. These are all the images which are available. You'll see there's a bunch of different ones. What this means for developers is potentially you can pull down and run your own container versions however you want on there. You can do that right now. So Debian, you can see Alpine, lots of different Linux versions. Okay, moving on. Let's get to the developer stuff, right? Moving on. Crostini, we finally get into the container, which is now a full Debian. It's got a lot more bells and whistles than the Chrome OS, and certainly it's fully interactable. You can blow it away, you can run it. So that's what that is. Now, how does this all work? So what will happen is once we start a Linux app on that container, there's some system tools called Sommelier, which is using a Wayland proxy to go back and talk to Chrome. There's actually maybe 10 or 20 different daemon services that are running inside that little box, but I wasn't going to go into those. That's for a different talk. Right, so I was going to demo a few things on top of that. So what you'll notice here is I've got things like Andrew Studio, I've got code. Let's fire those up. Now, keep in mind, this is running from the Linux container, right? Contacting back through Sommelier into Chrome and then running natively. So you have a full desktop just like you would a Mac, right? And this is how I transitioned from Mac and Pixelbook and been, I think, pretty happy with it. I mean, I do web dev and Golang and stuff like that. I'm not doing Android and sort of embedded systems. So just that's just something so you know. But all the tools that I needed are there, including progressive web apps like Spotify, so I can listen to music, Netflix. You can see that here. So we have Spotify running. That's a progressive web app, and that's native on the Chrome OS. And then we got Studio, VS Code, and Android Studio, which is running inside the container through Sommelier all the way back into Chrome. So the reason I'm explaining all this is because I sort of needed to understand the fundamentals, because when I ran into problems, I didn't want to just throw it away and go back to the Mac. You sort of needed to know where Google is at on this journey with their developer platform. And hopefully that's helpful. Let's see, you can also do backups, which is quite handy, so you can back this entirely up. I installed Fuse OS and then mounted that straight to Google Cloud, and you can then drop it straight on there. And it's totally portable across devices. So if somebody else had a Pixelbook, I could download my container, have all of my apps, my data, everything right there, and run it completely again. So that's quite nice, quite portable. Apps like Fuse I talked about. Oh yeah, for anybody who does, I guess, DevOps stuff, the other thing you can do is, I'm in Penguin here, this is the main Docker. Docker runs as well. So now I can run, I've got a Docker daemon inside my container, and I can do Docker builds and then push those to wherever. So again, like I said, turtles all the way down. Gets a bit confusing. Right. So let me just go back to my slides. Got a few other things that I could talk about. The Chrome local stuff, system Chrome. I don't know if you guys seen the Chrome flags. You can use. Do you guys use Chrome flags? I'll leave that. So this has got tons of experimental features that you can turn on. 1 minute. Okay, great. And that's cool. And just in summary, then. For development, I thought it was very good. It's high security, it's great hardware, Bluetooth works perfect, keyboard. So in terms of a Linux-based platform, and it wasn't Mac, which is, I think, fairly heavyweight for Linux, this is fantastic. Super, super light, great to move around with. It's great for cloud-native stuff, and has all the nice things you want. Doesn't have solid GPU support yet. Still get a lot of crashes on that. USB support's coming. And then you currently have to have developer mode to use ADB. So that's the big problem at the moment. End-user compute is great because you can secure these devices, and so you should be able to bring them into corporate and use beyond corporate methods. The future is Fuchsia, microkernel, Zircon, and Flutter apps, but they're going to be a while. So until that happens, there's this for developing on Google hardware. So thanks very much.